In our discussion, we're going to be reviewing break-even and various forms of cost volume profit. But we're also going to introduce this concept of what we call sunk cost. Let's review some details related to this case. We have leased a piece of equipment for $105,000. This is a 5-year lease. The lease payments annually are $23,100. Now we're looking at the annual activity, because what you notice here is that we conducted 11,000 tests per year. Included in this is the fact that we have a variable cost of $27.50, and we are assuming a payment of $37.50. So we're going to ask a couple questions. The first is, what is our profit? The next is, what is our break-even point? And ultimately, what do we need to do to get a profit of $90,000? We have two formulas. They're basically the same formula, but altered differently to get to a calculated variable. The first is we're trying to calculate the profit. So what we have is the contribution margin times volume minus fixed cost. The contribution margin is our payment minus the variable cost. In the volume calculation, which is what we're using for break-even as well as our projected profit, we are looking at fixed cost plus expected profit. Now, in a break-even point, the expected profit is 0. And then we're dividing this by the contribution margin. So first, let's calculate our profit. We're going to put our cursor into row 15, column C, and what you'll notice is that I'm typing in the cell, but the information is going to show up on the formula bar. The other thing to keep in mind with Excel is when we're doing an addition and multiplication or division, is we do the addition or subtraction within parentheses, and then we do the multiplication. So in a formula, we start off with the equal sign. What we're initially looking for is the contribution margin. The contribution margin is our payment minus the variable cost. We close the parenthesis, and then we multiply this by our volume, and our volume is 11,000 units, and then we subtract our fixed cost. And our fixed cost is the $23,100. We hit enter, and we get a profit of $86,900. The next question is, what is our break-even point? We're using the second calculation, and the second calculation is we're attempting to calculate volume. So in this case, all we're looking for is we're looking for the fixed cost, which is the lease payment. We're dividing this by our contribution margin. So again, in parentheses, we have the payment minus the variable cost. We close the parenthesis, and what this says is that our break-even point is 2,310 units. So it looks like we're doing pretty good. We're doing $11,000 or 11,000 units per year, but in fact our break-even point is only 2,310 units. The next question is, what volume do we need to have a profit level of $90,000? So again, we're using the same volume calculation, but we're also including the expected profit. So in row 19, column H, we are typing in our calculation, start off with the equal sign, and in this case what we're looking for is we're looking for our lease cost, annual lease cost, plus the expected profit, closing the parenthesis, and then we are dividing this by our contribution margin. So what is our contribution margin? Is our payment minus the variable cost. We close the parenthesis, and what this says is that we would need 11,310 units to have a volume or a profit of $90,000, which becomes very important because essentially what you might consider is this is the level of profit that we would need maybe to pay for an additional employee to do additional work. So in our cost volume profit analysis in these scenarios, what we're attempting to do is we're attempting to determine what if. So the other issue is, you notice that we have a volume of 11,310 units at a profit of $90,000. Well, we could change this. We could say, well, what if we actually want a profit of $100,000? We type that in here, and you notice how the volume changes to 12,310. Now, I'm going to introduce something a little bit different, and that is related to sunk cost. Let's consider some additional facts. The additional fact is that what we said is that the lease is a 5-year lease. In the 3rd year of the lease, because of technology changes, our piece of equipment is obsolete. A new technology has been introduced. Now the problem is that we can't break the lease and we can't sell the instrument because the salvage value of the instrument is 0. Let's further state that a third party has offered us or proposed to us that his company or her company can do the test for $25 per unit. So the question becomes is, what do we consider when making this decision? And the reality that in a sunk cost scenario, the expenditure, and we're talking about the expenditure related to the piece of equipment, is over. That expenditure cannot be reversed. Therefore, the sunk cost of the equipment becomes irrelevant. The only thing that becomes relevant is the cost provided by the third party and our variable cost, which we determined was $27.50. So assuming that we cannot bring our variable cost to below $25, there's no other decision, at least from a financial cost accounting perspective, other than to store the piece of equipment and to continue the service through this third party. And that really is the point related to sunk cost. We really have to ignore these other costs associated with the equipment, with the decision. The expenditure is over, and it cannot be reversed.